Live from the Lincoln Theater at the University of Hartford, the Hartford Courant and Fox Connecticut present a debate featuring the Republican candidates for Connecticut's open U.S. Senate seat. Now, here's our moderator, Fox Connecticut news anchor, Brent Hardin.
Peter Schiff, Linda McMahon, Rob Simmons. Which of these candidates will be the Republican nominee for U.S. Senate in Connecticut's 2010 election? In the next hour, we'll hear from all three as the Hartford Courant and Fox Connecticut, in partnership with the University of Hartford, present Senate 2010, a live debate from the Lincoln Theater on the University of Hartford campus. Thank you for joining us. I'm Brent Hardin of Fox Connecticut, and I'll be your moderator for the evening. At this same time and in this same place last night, my colleague at the Hartford Courant, Tom Condon, moderated a debate with the Democratic candidates. Tonight, it's the Republicans' turn. But before we begin, let me introduce to you our hosts for the evening. First, the president of the University of Hartford, Walter Harrison. Mr. Harrison.
Thank you, Brent, and welcome to the University of Hartford. The University of Hartford is a private university with a public purpose, and so we are pleased to be partnering with the Hartford Courant and Fox Connecticut to present tonight's debate. We believe that the best public policy is determined by vigorous discussion and debate. It's been a pleasure to work with Rich Graziano and his colleagues, and we thank you.
I am happy to call boss, publisher, president, and CEO of the Courant and Fox Connecticut, Rich Graziano. Rich.
Good evening. Thank you, Brent. Well, we at CT1 Media, the Hartford Courant and Fox Connecticut, are very excited and proud to be hosting and broadcasting this very special political event. I'd like to thank Carolyn Lumsden, Steve Farber, everyone at our CT1 Media team for working so hard to put this together, as well as thanking Walt and his entire team here at the University of Hartford for being such great hosts and great partners. Thank you for watching, and good luck to the candidates.
All right, thank you, Rich. Now, here are your candidates in alphabetical order. Linda McMahon is the former CEO of WWE, a global company she started with her husband nearly 30 years ago, and that today employs more than 500 Connecticut workers. Peter Schiff is a successful businessman, best-selling author, and economic expert, widely credited with foretelling the U.S. economic crisis years before it occurred. And Rob Simmons is a Vietnam veteran, a former CIA officer, and a former U.S. congressman from Connecticut. Our thanks to all three of you for joining us here tonight. Now, each of the candidates will answer two questions on three subjects: the economy, health care, and foreign policy. Each will have 1 minute to respond and then 1 minute to rebut. Our timekeepers are from the League of Women Voters tonight. They will cue the candidates when their time is short and when their time is up, with yellow and red cards, respectively. At the end, each candidate will make a short closing statement, and by a draw of cards earlier today, Mr. Simmons will answer the first question first. Ms. McMahon will give the first closing statement. And so we begin with Mr. Simmons. The first question is on the economy. The economy shows signs of crawling out of the recession with 2 straight quarters of economic growth in 2009. Yet job growth is slow, and many are predicting a double-dip housing slump. What's your plan for repairing the economy, and would you support a second stimulus bill, Mr. Simmons?
Well, first of all, I can tell you what I wouldn't do. I would not recommend lawsuits as a way to create jobs. What I would recommend is that we go to the fundamental value that all Americans have, which is free enterprise, and in particular that we focus on small business. My plan for prosperity has 5 points: taxes, access to capital, reducing the cost of health care, reducing the cost of tort claims, and streamlining training. But within that plan, we do not have legislation or proposals like the TARP or like the stimulus package or any of these other bailouts, which I believe do not work. We have to focus on the fundamental engine of our economy, which is small business and free enterprise.
All right, Mr. Simmons, thank you. Mr. Schiff, same question.
Well, first of all, Washington is trying to convince us that we're having a jobless recovery. They're half right. The reason that it's jobless is because it's not a recovery. All we're doing is spending more borrowed money, and that's the source of our problem. You see, we have to make a decision as a nation. Do we want to grow the government or grow the economy? Because we can't do both. The stimulus is not the answer. The stimulus is part of the problem. It's actually a depressant. The government has been growing like a cancer, and the bigger the government gets, the more blood it actually sucks from the taxpayer to sustain it. We need real economic reform to unleash capitalism and free markets, and that means we have to slash government spending right now, we have to lower taxes, and we have to reduce the regulations that are burdening business and destroying jobs.
All right, Mr. Schiff, thank you. And Ms. McMahon.
Thank you. First of all, thanks for the folks who are here tonight, our hosts for this debate, and our folks who've welcomed us into their home tonight. We do have to get our folks back to work, because this economy is not sustainable unless people get back to work, unless they have jobs. And small businesses do create 70% of the jobs in this country. We have to incentivize them through tax breaks, through tax credits, through reducing payroll tax. I've traveled around the state. I talked to a small business owner, and I asked him, what is the most important thing we could do for you to help you recover? And he said, reduce my payroll tax. I could add another person. I could take on another job. And I could then grow my business again. But I also need to have credit from my bank. Used to I could get a bridge loan. Now I can't. So we have to free up those credit markets for our small businesses.
All right. Now, Mr. Simmons, back to you. 1 minute to rebut.
I think it's very important when we discuss this issue that we do focus on the damage that has been done, I would argue damage that has been done to our economy by legislation like TARP. I opposed TARP. I didn't think TARP was a good idea. Many economists opposed it at the time. I believe that Mrs. McMahon has expressed support for it. But all I see coming out of a legislation like TARP is the taxpayer footing the bill for executive bonuses, executive compensation, executive country club fees, and a whole range of things that we did not comprise when that legislation was first proposed. I think it's been a mistake. I think we could have done a much better job with private sector lending backstopped by government resources.
All right, Mr. Schiff, over to you.
Sure, I opposed TARP as well. I opposed it on national television when everybody told us that we needed it. We're not going to solve these problems until we understand the nature of the problem. See, the country is in trouble because we spent too much money. Individuals spent too much money. We went on a global shopping spree with government money. We bought all sorts of things we couldn't afford. Now the government is spending money on programs we don't need and we can't afford. In order to get out of this hole, we're going to have to work our way out and produce our way out. We can't spend our way to prosperity. We can't borrow our way out of debt. We need capital. We need investments. And all of this is being inhibited by the stimulus and by the TARPs. We need to embrace free market capitalism. That was the source of our original prosperity, and it's the only way we're going to regain it.
And Ms. McMahon.
Thank you. I just want to make one thing clear, though, relative to TARP. From my standpoint, as Rob had indicated that I supported it, I did support TARP in its original form. I would not have supported AIG bailouts or auto bailouts, but the original form of TARP was as our economy was melting down and our banks were going to get money to take toxic assets off their books, they would pay back those loans with interest, and that money would then be used to pay down the debt. That is what I supported, and Congress has the ability today to take the balance of TARP money and pay down the debt, and I think that's what we should do. I agree that we have to stop job-killing legislation like card check, like cap and trade, and we have to create a feeling of stability and a culture of stability for our businesses so that they can feel free to borrow, that they don't have to worry about what taxes are coming down on top of them, if health care is going to be put on top of them at this particular point. So they are in a period of instability, and it doesn't make them want to grow and take risk.
All right. Thank you, candidates. On to the second question on the economy. This comes from one of our viewers, Jim McLaren, who did not indicate the town he lives in. Very simply, his question, what specific changes would you advocate as a senator to stimulate job creation? I believe we were just talking about that. Mr. Simmons, you answer first again.
Referring back to my plan for prosperity, the 5-point plan, I would focus very specifically on taxes. First of all, the Bush tax cuts of 2001, 2003, they're scheduled to expire. If they expire, they will create a very large tax increase for the American people and for business. That's wrong. I recommend a 40% payroll tax cut as an incentive to business to keep jobs and maybe even create jobs. Expensing equipment has worked out very well. I would make the $250,000 expensing for equipment permanent. Death taxes are death to families that own farms and small businesses. We need to reduce death taxes. Access to capital is important. Working through the SBA, we've got to get the loans to the banks to make some more loans. And we certainly have to reduce health care costs, which I'll talk about later.
All right, Mr. Simmons, Mr. Schiff, how to create jobs?
Well, first we have to understand where jobs come from. They come from private enterprise. They come from profits. They come from savings. They come from investment. They don't come from government. Government inhibits job creation. We can't create jobs by passing legislation. We can certainly destroy jobs. We have to remember that the government doesn't have any resources. The government only has the resources that they take from the private sector. And it's very easy for our elected leaders to point to a job that they claim was created by the stimulus. But they don't accept responsibility for the better jobs that the stimulus money destroyed, because the government had to take that money from one company in order to feed it to another company that maybe should have failed, or maybe is a government job. And the problem with government jobs is we have to pay their salaries. Private sector jobs are self-sustaining, and they actually produce things that increase the standard of living of everybody. So we need more private sector jobs, and to get them, we need a lot less government, we need less regulations and lower taxes, and we can't do that unless we cut spending.
All right, Ms. McMahon.
Well, I think you'd hear a lot of agreement among the three of us here on the stage, because we really do understand about jobs and about small businesses and how they are the engine of this economy. And I think we all share a lot of the same programs in terms of bringing those taxes down and creating the environment that these small businesses can grow. I've created 500 jobs here in Connecticut. I've grown my business here. I know that it takes a great deal of confidence in the marketplace before you take that risk of adding people or taking on that next project. You have to have confidence in the credit system that can see you through in tough times. And when government regulations and mandates are coming down on top of you that are unfunded and required, it puts you in a very bad spot to make your business grow and be better. If you create jobs, those people pay income tax, they buy more goods and services, they add to the economy. So that's what we have to do, is stimulate the economy with jobs.
All right, and Mr. Simmons, back to you, one more minute on job creation.
I served for 22 months as the first business advocate for the state of Connecticut, and I had the opportunity in that capacity to visit 400 businesses throughout the state, one a day, every day. And what I learned in that process was several things. First and foremost, small business in Connecticut is big. Small business in America is big. Small business in Connecticut is responsible for most of our job creation, and across the nation, 70% of all jobs are created by small business. 97% of all businesses in America today are less than 20 employees, and that's why my plan for prosperity focuses on them. And what do they tell me? Taxes are too high. Tort claims and litigation are eating them up. The litigious society in which we live is troublesome. They can't afford health care. So these issues are important, and this is one reason why I signed the pledge put out by the Americans for Tax Reform, a pledge that if elected to the Senate, I would not vote to raise taxes, and I would, of course, encourage all my colleagues to do the same.
All right, Mr. Schiff. 1 minute for rebuttal on job creation.
Well, again, we have to understand where jobs come from. You know, politicians like to promise that they can create jobs because it sounds good. They like to have summits on how to create jobs. Meanwhile, everything that they're doing is preventing jobs from being created. That's why almost 10% of the nation is unemployed. It's actually more like 17% if you count the people who are underemployed working part-time or who have just given up and are now discouraged. So what the government has to do is understand all the roadblocks that it puts in front of employers that prevent them from hiring people, roadblocks that I've experienced in my own business. We need to make it easier for businesses to expand and grow. We need to lift the burden of government. That's the only real stimulus that we have, is by shrinking government. but with all the money the government is spending, and more important, all the money the government is borrowing. If you want to know why businesses aren't loaning, they're loaning. The problem is they're loaning it all to the federal government. There's nothing left for anybody else. So until we stop the spending, we're not going to get economic growth, and we're not going to get job creation.
All right, and Ms. McMahon.
Robert indicated that he was the business advocate in Connecticut. You know, I just have to say, as growing a company and being the CEO of a company, until you've had to make a payroll, until you've had to balance a budget in that company, until you have your own capital at risk, you can't stand in the shoes of that small business owner and know what he's going through. The fear that he has. If it's just 2 or 3 guys. I was in a deli the other day, and when the owner of that deli was telling me, you know, if this bill goes through where I'm going to have to provide benefits for part-time workers, he said, I'll have to go out of business. I can't work anymore myself. So until you've stood in those shoes and understood what small businesses go through, when they go to get a loan, what kind of collateral they have to post. They form good relationships with their community bank, but the regulations now are so hard and so tight on the community banks that they're not lending to small businesses because they're afraid. So we have to free up some of these credit markets and let these small businesses be able to grow.
All right, thank you.